Okay, so last session we were talking, we did these exercises. Where again, we're in the design stage, and the objective of these exercises was just to kind of try to make you guys think about this idea of analyzing after you do an analysis and you have a certain baseline for the design of the information system or the database system. Think about the entities and the relationships. That's the part we're in right now. So we had two situations. One that was Sarah Pet's grooming and basic veterinary services and hotel for pets, and continuation of the COVID-19 vaccination status system. And so you guys worked on these, and these are just examples of how we could represent some entities and relationships. Maybe you guys added some more, maybe you guys named them differently. But let's say it this way: if this were an exam and you my internet connection isn't stable. If you guys if this were a problem in the exam, this or any variation of this would be correct. So some of the entities we could identify for the Sarapets, the customers. Oh, this is just an observation, because I'm not an English teacher. I'm not an expert in English. I just make these comments just. So when we talk about somebody who's buying something, in Spanish we say clientes, right? So we usually translate that in English to client, right? So again, I'm not a dictionary. I don't know the specific definitions, but more in this scenario, we're talking about customer, okay, rather than a client. Usually the word client is used for a more
lasting, right? Like,
more of a lasting, more of a high level relationship, like somebody that has a contract with you or something like
I
that.
feel like a client is closer to an associate or to an actual customer.
Yeah, so there's a more deep association
more like a lawyer, no?
It's like working with
Me
someone.
representation of my client.
of my client, but because there is a contract
And
between.
this is service or a contract.
Yeah. So for example, let's say that that you have a company, Marco, and you have a bunch of pets, and you're going to be sending me your pets. So you and I make a contract. So now you are my client. Like Andres said, it's more of a long-lasting, and it's out of a contract. That's when we use the word client. Here, so I've got a Schnauzer, and I'm going to take my Schnauzer over to the hotel because I'm going to be going out on the weekend, and I just purchased that service. I may be working with I may be purchasing services with the organization frequently. That means I'm a frequent customer or something like that, but we don't necessarily call them clients, okay? There's a couple of examples of attributes there. It's not exhaustive. We haven't talked about attributes yet. I just asked you to think about some attributes. So the customer could have an ID, a name. Then we have the pets. The pets would have a name. They would have a type. There could be many types of pets. The service, meaning the service that we're offering, because there's grooming services, there's hotel services, there's basic veterinary services. So the type could be an attribute, the cost could be another one. And some of you were also talking about the spaces that were used. So there might be spaces or kennels to keep the animals. There might be other spaces that are used for medical purposes, etc. So the spaces, the type, and the capacity could be examples of attributes as well. Again, this isn't necessarily an exhaustive list. We're just mentioning some for sort of a first pass analysis. And some of the relationships, while customers own pets, customers purchase services, pets use the services, services use spaces. Those could be examples of relationships that we have. With regards to the first example, Sarah Pets, anything anybody would like to add or comment, or ask. Again, you guys might have named these differently. You might have added a few more, depending on how you address the problem. But this is just an example of what we could have there. Any comments, observations, or questions with the first one?
I think
Yes.
for example, the services and space, like, I think those are better words than the ones that we use because like it's more concrete. Like, for example, I think my team used like hotels or rooms,
Hmm.
and I think space is like better.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation on this when we're working on these, and you guys are gonna have to do it with the problems you're gonna do for the application project. I always have this philosophy. Again, this isn't like a rule or anything. This is my approach. When you're a developer, you can name things however you want because you're developing things. You're constructing things. You're doing the design. And you want it to work, and it can work with whatever names you put here. We could have called them A, B, C, and A owns B, and etc. But my perspective is always, as developers, we do have to think in naming things as descriptively as possible for somebody else that's going to be looking at the design, right? And I want you guys to think about that. When you do a design of something, I always thought about doing this exercise. I never actually did it in a programming class. So let's say that I give you guys a programming problem and you do your version, Andres, with whatever names of the variables you want. And Joel does his version and Fernanda does her version. And then we exchange them. And I would be curious if you would understand the coding and the variable designation of a design that was done by somebody else. Probably if you were clear enough and descriptive enough, you would understand it, but maybe not. And so that's something just to keep in mind. So it's enough if you guys understand the terminology, right? It's enough. But maybe we have to think about that. I had a student, I think, I don't remember if I mentioned this anecdote last semester or this semester to you guys. I had a student once that he was such a good programmer. He's one of these programmers that are kind of like artistic, that you could give him a problem and he was so good, so quick, so agile in doing the programming. He would solve it in a very, very elegant way and very agile. He was really artistic in doing the program. The problem was, well, that wasn't the problem, but he was a fan of anime. He was a very big fan of anime. So when he named his variables, all of his variables were anime character names. So his variables were, instead of calling it A, or instead of calling it customer, pet, service, and space, he called them Pikachu, he called them Ranma, he called them whatever. And all of his programming, you just saw a bunch of anime names in the program. And it was very elegant and very well done. But if you weren't him, you wouldn't have understood it. Okay, so those are things to keep in mind. It's not wrong. So in the exam, for example, or an evaluation, I'm not going to put it wrong if you called it room, as long as I understand it. Okay, so don't worry about that, but keep it in mind. Okay, we're gonna, okay. Okay, so the other example had to do with the COVID-19 registration system, and we're also going to be continuing that one. And so some of the entities, and here as well, going back to Andres's comment, here as well, you guys could have used very different names or terminologies. It might be a little bit difficult even to identify them, but one main entity is the user. And the user of the system with regards to the person that we are gathering the vaccination information from and that we want to have this sort of vaccine passport from. So I call them registrants, but they could be citizens, they could be users, they would have name, addresses. The vaccines themselves have names, have lots, also as examples of attributes. I put there the vaccine centers. Why? Because we want to relate them to the vaccines and the registrants. The type of ID documentation that we're going to have. There's going to be different types of documents that identify us. And you guys mentioned a few of them, a passport, think a lot of us said that everybody should have a passport, but not necessarily everybody has a passport. Everybody has a CURP, however. The vaccine documentation or evidence of the documentation of vaccine, that could be another one. And so some relationships there, a registrant is administered a vaccine or a user gets a vaccine. User or registrant is vaccinated at a vaccination center. A registrant has ID documentation and vaccine documentation, and vaccines are managed or administered by a vaccine center. So that could be, those could be examples of entities and relationships. And again, you guys might have named them differently. You might have added some others. Something that I was hearing in some of the discussions, just to keep in mind, is that I remember some group saying, well, the developers of the web system, those are going to be entities. Well, no, not necessarily. The developer is kind of like this ghost in the machine. We don't necessarily have to consider them as part of the structure of the database. So remember that in the end, this has to kind of give us the structure of the database with regards to the data that we want to store. So that's what we're thinking about when we're identifying this. With regards to the COVID-19 registration system, any observations, comments, or questions over here or over at home? Over at home, reactions. Are you guys still alive? Questions? Any questions, comments, or observations? Nope. Okay, good. Wow, let's hope that beginning next week we don't have to do that and everybody's here. It would be really, really fun. One thing that I was thinking about teaching in the pandemic is that even if all of you are here in the classroom, I think that probably I'm still going to be doing this, where I'm going to be logged on to Zoom and the class is going to be recorded anyway. So there's a sort of I don't know if they're going to take away I hope they're not going to take away the cameras or anything like that. Because I think having the recording of the class is useful. At least that's what I've been told by some students, that having the recording is useful to review. Okay, so right now we've gone through steps 1 and 2, which is the identification of entities, the definition of the relationships, and now we're going to go through the next 6 steps in the development of this structure that's called the entity relationship diagram. That's going to help us to build a database. And the next step is define cardinality of relationships. Cardinality. What do you guys think cardinality means?
The direction?
That's good. That's good. So when we think about the cardinal points, we're thinking about north, east, west, south. So it's kind of like a direction.
West side.
A direction. Yeah, good. Andres. It has to do with that, and it also has to do with the direction and the amount or what that direction looks like. So yeah, let's keep that in mind. Okay. So cardinality is going to be the way in which the entities relate to each other specifically. And it has to do with direction because we're going to have entities. And so an entity is going to relate from A to B, but it can also relate from B to A. Cardinality can be, there's many types of cardinalities. The 3 main types of cardinalities are the ones that are listed there. So there's one cardinality that's called one-to-one. The way we represent cardinality is that there's going to be a number to, what's that called? No, it's not the semicolon. 2 points there. I forgot what that's called. The colon, right? The semicolon is point comma. Yeah, colon. 1 colon 1 is described as a one-to-one relationship. And we're going to talk about those in a moment. So what is an example of a one-to-one relationship? Let's see. Anna, are you there?
Yes.
Hi, Anna. Do you have a driver's license, Anna?
No.
Oh, you don't have a driver's license. Okay, that's fine. Do you have an INE?
Yes.
So you have an INE. Okay, so here's an example of a one-to-one relationship. Ana, you have an INE, which is this document, this card that identifies you for a specific purpose, which is the National Electoral Registry, right? That INE belongs to you and only to you. Would you agree, Ana?
Yes.
That's an example of a one-to-one relationship. So Anna, you have an ID, which is a specific ID. You have one INE, right? Because you don't have many INEs, right?
Yes.
You're not running this covert electoral fraud organization underground where you have many INEs and you want to bring down the system, right? Please answer no. Good.
No.
Good. And on the other hand, that INE belongs and is referenced only to you because it has specific, even if there's another Ana Salcido in Mexico, which might have even been born on the same date as you, your INE has your CURP. And by the way, the CURP has a structure that considers those situations about people being born on the same date and names and all that. It would have to be a really, really weird coincidence that there would be two Ana Salcidos born on the same date, in the same state, in the same city, et cetera, et cetera. So that INE has your information, Ana, and nobody else's information, right? That's a one-to-one relationship. One entity has only one instance of the other entity and vice versa, right? So one citizen is going to have one INE, and that INE belongs to only one citizen, okay? Is that clear, Anna? Does that make sense? Yeah. Thank you, Anna. That's a one-to-one relationship. Arturo, go ahead.
So if I understand it right, it means that something can only have that certain type of entity.
Mhm. Yeah, so when there's are going to be certain relationships that we're going to see, not all of them, certain relationships that those are one-to-one. So that entity can only have one of the other entity, and the second entity can only have one of the first, okay? Why is that relationship important? Because if we're talking about citizens and INES, well, as I was mentioning right now, you can't have one citizen that has many INES, right? That would even be, I think, illegal. And on the other hand, an INE can only be assigned to one citizen, okay? So that's an example of a one-to-one relationship. So if that's clear, can somebody give me another example of a one-to-one relationship between a couple of entities? Any entities that you think about?
Well, anything that has a serial number in it.
The matrícula.
A serial number, something, things that have serial numbers to it are assigned, like a vaccine and their lot, for example. Your student ID, your matrícula. So
License plates.
license plate should only, one license plate should only be assigned to one car or one vehicle, correct? The matrícula is also a very good example. So a student has a student ID, and that student ID is only for that student. So usually, as you're identifying, there are these cases where we want to uniquely identify one entity with the other. So those are one-to-one relationships, okay? Questions up to this point? We're good up to this point? We're going to be doing a bunch of exercises where we identify these. Now there's the next type of relationship, which is called a one-to-many relationship. A one-to-many relationship. So a one-to-many relationship is also represented as a one-to-n or n-to-one relationship. And that means that one entity can have many of the other entity, but the other entity can only have one of the first one, okay? That's an example of that's how the one-to-many or many-to-one relationship works. Let me give you let me try to give you an example. A student here. The students is an entity, right? Student is an entity. An academic program, a carrera. By the way, sometimes you guys translate carrera to career, and that's not correct. When we're talking about a carrera, it's, the technical term is academic program,
A
or
race.
program, a race, yes. That's weird, right? Because that's a thing in Spanish that's kind of funny to translate, that in English, it's more academic program or program. And here in Spanish, we say that an academic program is a carrera, which is also a synonym of a race. So that even puts you in the mind that you have to do something quickly. Marco.
What's the difference between an academic program and a major?
There are different ways of naming the same thing. Majors. So this is kind of the way I would explain it. In the American educational system, there's many ways in which you can get a degree. So for example, you can say, I want to study industrial engineering. I'm going to study the academic program that's industrial engineering, and I want to study just that. And you get an industrial engineering degree. The other is that you can go into a program that has majors and minors. So what does that mean? I'm going to study engineering, and my major is going to be in industrial engineering, and my minor is going to be in statistics. So you're getting an engineering degree with major means that you're specializing in this area, and minor means that you're also getting a sort of a more of a short specialization in another area.
In your case, this will be your major.
Yeah, because seeing it this way, because it's your only alternative. Here in Mexico, it's different. In the Mexican educational system, you can actually just study one thing. The American system is very, I'm not going to say flexible, because flexible isn't the correct word. It's very varied. You can actually study in a community college and just study something general,
And then transfer it to.
and then just transfer to a university.
And there's also a difference between university and college, right? I think university is like higher education. College is like a bachelor's degree or something like that.
Yeah, they have different degrees in the United States. So there's a bachelor's degree. There are bachelors in science, bachelors in arts, etc. Yeah, so those are
So
different.
if in the future, if we were to look for a job, and there's someone that went to college and has like a bachelor's degree or not necessarily a major.
Well, in this,
We are competing with them, and we come from Mexico, and it's that's university. This is a university, right? Not a
yes,
college.
this is university.
We should basically have an upper hand on them because it's a university.
Technically, yes.
Not a community
It would
college.
depend on who you're applying to, and how they're going to interpret that. So one thing that a university has is a university should have accreditations. They should have a bunch of other things that demonstrate a higher level than a college. But in the end, it's going to depend on who you're applying to. But that's something, sometimes the confusion when you're applying, you're basically you have a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering. Now, if they're going to be asking you for a major, your major is industrial engineering. Okay.
And I have another question. Since this is a university, and you were talking about accreditations. Are those the credits? Because when you want to transfer between universities, there's sometimes they ask for credits, right? For example, in the United States, you were to transfer from one university to another. They ask for your credits, or like the credits you have in certain subjects.
Yeah, the thing there is that the simple way of explaining it is in the United States, depending on the number of hours of the class, there's different credits, which means it's literally credits like you're gaining. So if you want to get a degree, you need, I'm going to say a number. If you want to get a degree, you need 200 credits. So okay, I'm going to take this course, but this course has 4 credits. Okay, I've got 4. I'm going to take this other course, it's 2 credits. So you build your credits with certain requisites. Here in Mexico, regardless of the number of hours that a course has because of the Mexican structure, all of the courses have the same number of credits to get your degree. So there's actually a formula to translate the Mexican credits to the foreign, and even if in Europe it's different.
In a case that we're going for, it's supposed to be the updated program, right? Like the content of the program. If we were to transfer to the United States into a university, would it be no problem?
I don't think there would be a problem, but there's probably going to be a lot of documentation that you're going to need to present to the university to be able to do the transfer. I haven't had a situation that I've seen of a student here in Mexico trying to transfer credits in the United States. Why? Because we are not a transfer credits institution, even though we're accredited. So I'm really not sure how that would happen. The thing I can tell you is that your academic program is accredited. So if you were to want to study a master's degree or continue your studies to another level, that degree is going to be totally valid. But I haven't had a situation where a student, let's say that in your case, you're in second semester and say, I want to continue my industrial engineering studies in University of California, and I'm going to transfer these credits over there. I'm not even sure how that would work. Because even within the institutions in the United States, each institution and according to the level have their own restrictions. So it would have to be on particular case basis. You wanted to say something, Vinny?
Well, what Marco was saying that like if we were an upper hand from people who have well, we don't recognize, well, in my case, I'm not American, so if I wanted to work there, wouldn't I have to do the test like, to see if I'm accredited there? Like doctors and.
Oh,
Is there because they don't have the same.
well, we're getting a little bit off track, but the discussion is interesting. No, okay, so let's just specify what we're talking about accreditation. So there's things that are called accreditation, certification, there's different levels. When we say accreditation, it means that the institution you come from is accredited or has a sort of a seal, okay? Then there's certifications that have to do with professions. And those are usually regional and national. But when do those apply, Daniel? It depends on the country, and it depends on how that profession impacts, or how that country or state within a country is interpreting how that profession impacts. So what do I mean? You have a medical degree here in Mexico, and you can be a medical professional here in Mexico, right? You can't just go to the United States or Europe and be a medical doctor over there, because those countries need you to be certified over there. Okay, so medical. If you are an architect or a civil engineer, you need to do the same. You're not going to be able to sign. You're not going to be able to sign a document that has to do with the building if you're not certified in the country, right? Let me think about.
In your case, wouldn't it be different? Because we're supposed to be on par with, I don't know.
Well, no, but
that's the right term.
I'm getting to the difference. In those two examples that I gave you, why do you guys think that the country needs some sort of validation that?
Because, can I answer?
Go ahead.
Because supposedly, not supposedly, the United States and Europe are way more advanced in.
No, it's actually really simple, because people can die. That's the.
Well, on your hands.
Yeah, so a medical doctor, let's say that you're a medical doctor in whatever country, but I don't know where you studied medicine. So if you're coming to my country and you're gonna be a doctor here, I need to verify you according to my standards that you can, that you can, because you're in charge of people. Now, why would a civil engineer need to also be certified?
Well, because maybe we sign off.
Because you're doing buildings and you're doing things where, and if the building comes down, I need to hold you accountable. And if you're not certified and not, I can't hold you accountable. So, say very simply, an industrial engineer, you can get certified in the United States as an industrial engineer. There's a bunch of, Professor Soloria, he's gone through the certification process in California to be a professional engineer. That's a certification that we have. That is equivalent for you having a seal of approval for that. It helps your CV, but you don't need that to be able to work as an industrial engineer in the United States, unless the company you're working for or you're applying to requires that.
For example, in our case, I know we're getting out of the subject, but in our case, if you're in global program, if you graduate global program, and let's say a friend or a classmate that's on the regular course were to apply to the same job as an industrial engineer, is there like a difference between us that we have the accreditation supposedly of Abbott or I don't know what, or
Yeah,
WASC,
basic,
or I don't know what it is.
ABIT, yeah. Basically, what's gonna be happening there is the following, and to be very like blunt with you guys. Yes, you do have an advantage, but it's gonna depend if you reflect that advantage in your CV, in your resume. What's your advantage? You're coming from a global program that has the English component. So by default, that's, even if the other person might know English, that's something that in your resume is gonna be there. And you guys are also gonna have a few certifications that we're gonna give you, that you're also gonna put on your resume.
Yes.
Now,
The ones
what-
that The normal career don't have.
Doesn't have those.
Back to get them, right?
Yeah, but the important thing here, Marco, Daniel, and everybody, is for you to put them in your CV. I have a really good relationship with the global program students that are about to graduate. They're the first generation. And wow, last year, they were really stressed about their professional practices, their internships. They were really stressed. And I think most of them sent me their resumes so I could check them. And I really like slapped all of them because they didn't put any of this in their resume. So yeah, you're a global program alumni. And the only thing you put in your resume is, I'm studying industrial engineering for a semester. That's it. That's the only thing you put.
So it's like when you taught us how to pick up a girl.
Well, I didn't, I didn't teach you how to pick, I gave you some recommendations as to how you could approach, using math to get to, but yeah, you have to put it in your resume, because the other thing, I'm like, you guys have a Lean Green Belt certification that you got last semester. Why isn't that there? Oh, should I put it? Yes, you should put it. We gave you an electronic certification as well. Why didn't you put it there? Oh, I didn't think about that. And by the way, you need to put it in bold. And the other thing, do you guys know Microsoft tools? Yeah, put them there. You know how to use Excel? Put it there. You know how to use AutoCAD? You know how to use statistics software? Yeah, why don't you put it there? That's what the.
So like we were selling ourselves.
Yeah, you need to package your resume. And so, yeah, you are going to have an advantage, but you need to reflect that. That's number one. And number two, as well, if I had $1 for each time I've heard about a situation that there's this, let's say that there's a very cool resume. There's this student that has a very cool resume. He or she has 100 GPA average. They're the perfect student. They have 100. And then there's this other student that the resume is okay, but maybe they're a student that maybe has an 85, 90 average. They're not the top student. Maybe under normal logic, you would say, well, by default, the person who has 100 has an advantage, right? Well, on paper, yes. But if I had $1 for these students that tell me that their interview was terrible compared to the other student that was much more, yeah, you know what? Well, I can do this, I can do that. And the other student was so nervous and came out really, and that's the other tip. The interview, however, you need to go prepared to the interview. Yeah, so your resume is going to open the door. The interview is going to seal the deal, and that's what they're going to want from you. Okay. But yeah, one thing that I mentioned is when you put in your resume, you're studying industrial engineering global program at CETIS University. And even you can add there in your resume that WASC and ABET accredited. Okay, because there's going to be people.
Can we lie?
No. Yeah, the quick answer to that is no. Well, yes, you can, but you shouldn't, obviously. But you need to put that information there, okay? Because there are companies, I do know that there are companies that either give preference or only hire engineers that come out of institutions that are ABET accredited. That is true. That's why the ABET accreditation is really important.
One last thing. So
Sure.
on paper, we're supposed to have like an advantage, like you just said. If there's a normal course from another classmate from CETIS that's in the normal in industrial engineering. But in the case it's someone that comes from, I don't know, University of California or Texas Tech or whatever, do they have, not because of nationality, like degrees and accreditations and certificates? Do they have an advantage or are we?
I would say, that's a very good question, Mark, and I'm gonna answer my honest opinion about that. They have the advantage because the opportunities are closer to them. So what do I mean by that? Right now, last year, how many interns did we have at Tesla? The year before that, 0.
Oh, sorry.
This year, I think we're gonna be, on the total, we're gonna be having 4.
Nice.
Okay, there's a 1 or 2 more students that are gonna get into Tesla this year, if they haven't already started. And Fernanda already finished and she's got a job offer, and Sophia's already finished and she also has a job offer, and Viviana's there, so it's 3 and I think 2 more, so we maybe have 5. But a couple of years ago, we had 0. If we look at that proportion with regards to the University of California, there's a lot of probably interns from the University of California because the opportunities are very close to them, okay? But what we're noticing right now is that these students, I mean, 2 of them are mechanical engineers and 1 is an industrial engineer. Their resumes and their presentations and how they did the interviews, they were good enough or even as better than people from other institutions. So seeing it in another perspective, if you have a degree from CETIS University and you're comparing it to a degree from MIT, well, everybody knows MIT wherever you're at. So obviously the MIT is going to pop out, okay? But my recommendation is to prepare a good CV, go for the opportunities, and there's even recommendations as to how to do a good CV. Go for the opportunities and prepare yourself for the interviews. And that's what's going to open the door, okay? Do they have an advantage on paper? Well, maybe yes. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a disadvantage from coming from Mexico, from this university.
Can it happen, like, for example, like, I don't know, like, maybe the one of MIT is like a real engreído, so he's like, yeah, I'm MIT, so when he goes to the university, he's like, yeah, I don't know what you're asking me, like, I'm already going
Well,
to get the job.
that could happen.
Boom.
There's again, I've heard of many stories about people not doing good on interviews, and the way you present yourself, even that's what's going to get you through the door. So yeah. So all of this started out because I asked the question. I was the example of one to many. So I said that, well, one, students is an entity.
Oh, I think I have an example of the like words.
Well,
No,
Okay, what?
example of the class.
Yeah.
For example, a football team.
Uh-huh.
A team has multiple players with multiple numbers.
That's a good
But they only
example.
have one number.
That's a good example. That's an even better example than what I was giving. So what Marco's saying is that, let's say that football teams is an entity and players are another entity. So a football team can have many players, right? But a player can only be a part of one football team.
Amen.
At any given moment. That doesn't mean that the player can't, but you don't have a player that's right now a part of the New York Jets, and at the same time he's playing for the Los Angeles Rams. That can't happen. So that's a good example. That's a one-to-many relationship. One sports team can have many players, but a player can only be a part of one sports team.
Can that be another example, like an apartment building, like the building is located on this street and it's this number, but each apartment has its own number, but like the apartment has the same address as all the other ones?
Okay, I'm gonna contextualize it with regards to entities. So, let's say that there's an apartment building. Apartment buildings is buildings is the entity, and apartments is the other entity. So an apartment building can have many apartments, but the apartment is part of one building. Okay, so that's another example. The one I was gonna give you guys, so these are good examples, you guys. The one I was gonna give you guys is students in academic programs. So the Industrial Engineering Global program can have many students, right? But each student can only be a part of one, well, yeah, technically, yeah, a student can only be a part of one academic program unless we go into situations where a student is studying more than one academic program. Well, it's not, I wouldn't even say it's common, but I'm thinking that I did have one student many years ago that studied mechanical and mechatronics at the same time.
Why would you do that?
That's the question I asked him at the time.
I think I know someone, she's not in Cetis, but I think she's studying, I think mechanical and architecture or something in Texas. She's in Texas,
Yeah.
but she's studying two careers and it's like, why are you like, at the same time?
There are people that are high performance people that like to do that, first of all, because of the challenge. And the other is that maybe there's a plan that she has or he had at that time to have the 2 degrees for something, for some reason. That would depend on the university, because I don't remember in that case, the guy that was studying mechanical and mechatronics, if we had to do 2 different student IDs for him. So technically, he was the same person, but technically he wasn't the same student because he had 2 student IDs. So could be I think your examples are better, the sports and the apartment building. So those are one-to-many relationships, okay? Now, the last type of cardinality that we're going to have is the N-to-M, or the many-to-many relationship, which is described as N-to-M, okay? Now, that is a situation where we've got 2 entities, and one entity can have many of the other, and the second entity can have many of the first, okay? So I'm going to give an academic example as well, and think about examples that you guys might have as well. So students again, and courses, okay? So would you agree that a student can take many courses? All of you are taking more than one course. You can, it doesn't mean you have to, but you can take many courses, okay? And a course like this one can be taken by many students, okay? So that's a many-to-many relationship. Students can take many courses. A course can be taken by many students, okay? Of the 3, we're going to see when we create the database, the relationships that generate more complications for our database are the many-to-many. Those are the ones that can create a lot of confusion. Because the one-to-ones are going to be very direct. So a person can only have one ID. An ID is for only one person. That's going to be a very direct relationship. Yes.
Can it be, let's say we have Cinepolis Dulceria, and the Dulceria has a lot of providers,
Suppliers. Yeah.
suppliers, I mean, but then the supplier can also have many people to supply to, not only Cinepolis.
Yes, correct. That's a good example. So we've got let's say the candy shops, there's a name for those things in theaters. I forgot the name, but there's a name in theaters of where they call where you buy stuff. But the candy shops at movie theaters and the suppliers of candy. So the candy shop at the theaters can have many suppliers, and a supplier can supply to many theaters. Okay, so yeah, that's a good example of a many-to-many relationship. And those are going to be the ones that generate more complications for the design of our database. So the N-to-M, it's very, very important for us to clearly define how that relationship is going to work, or else we're going to have a lot of confusion in the design. So these are just sort of graphical representations. And I like to put the graphical representations because that's going to show you why it can be confusing. So in a one-to-one cardinality, we've got entity A and entity B, and A1, A2, 3, 4, B1, B2, B3, B4 are the instances. So there's only one there's only one line connecting each. That's why it's 1 to 1. There's only one line from left to right and from right to left. And then we go to the 1 to N cardinality. Now we've got lines going from A to B and from B to A, but the connections from A to B can be more than one. They can be crisscross, okay? So the difference between this one and this one, well, the second got a little bit more complicated, but not as complicated as the N to M. So in the N to M, everything can be related to everything else. And that's why the N to M relationship, or cardinality, I'm sorry, is one we have to be more, one that we have to be more careful with, okay? Okay, let's think about this. We've got a couple of entities and relationships. By the way, these are different entities and different relationships from different systems. They aren't part of one system. They're just as examples. And let's talk about the cardinality here for each case, how the cardinality would look. By the way, we could have a couple of entities and a relationship, and depending on how we interpret the relationship, there might be different types of cardinalities depending on how we're interpreting. Okay, so for example, the first entity relationship, students and faculty or professors. Students learn from faculty, or the other way around, faculty teach students. What type of cardinality would that be? Let's see if the people over at home are awake. Let's see, Miguel, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Miguel. Turn on your camera just for quick interaction here. So Miguel,
Wait, I'm trying to turn it on.
that's fine. We'll give you a couple of seconds. So Miguel, we're talking about students and faculty or professors.
Yes.
How would that relationship, what type of cardinality do you think that relationship could have? 1 to 1, 1 to many, or many to many? And when you're thinking about that, Miguel, kind of do the exercise that we were doing now. So we've got students and professors. How many students can be taught or learn, or I'm sorry, how many professors can a student have, and how many students can a professor have? So what type of relationship do you think, what type of cardinality would we have there?
I mean, I'm seeing many teachers teach at different faculties,
Mhm.
so it wouldn't be 1 to 1.
Okay,
I think it would be many to many.
that makes sense, right? That
Yeah.
makes sense. Because again, students, so you guys have many professors assigned to your courses. And I, as a professor, have many students. So it seems to be a many to many relationship there. So this could be an N to M relationship, or a many to many. That makes sense. Thank you. Miguel. That makes sense. We were talking about clients and customers before. So let's look at clients and contracts. Clients and contracts. This is one where we could have many and more than one interpretation, by the way, depending on how we look at it. But Alejandro, off the top of your head, what are you thinking here with regards to clients have or sign contracts? What type of relationships could we have? Cardinality could we have?
I think it would be many to many, but if we're thinking like in a specific contract,
Mhm.
I mean, many people can sign that specific contract, and that contract can be signed by many clients.
So one situation, so there could be more than one way to look at it depending on how we're looking at the contract or client, right? Oh, you're just stretching, right? You're not, okay. So let's say that, the contract, yes, go ahead. It could be, depending on the type of contract there is.
It could also be one too many.
It could be one to, so for example, let's give a few examples of each. So it could be one-to-one, okay? Let's say it's an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. And there's one NDA, and for some reason, Joel, I'm asking you to sign that NDA because I don't want you to say anything about whatever. So that's one contract or one NDA that's being signed by one entity. That could be an example or a situation where it's one-to-one, okay? Now, let's see another type of contract. Yes, go ahead.
For a one too many, and an architect. He could be working in different projects with different contracts, where it's just one architect for multiple projects.
Mhm. There could be a one-to-many relationship where I am signing many contracts for an organization. It's good.
Uh,
That's good. Yeah, Daniel?
So I have one for many to many.
Mhm.
So let's say, I like to flip houses
Uh-huh.
and I found several, houses,
Mhm.
but they all are from different, let's say, realtors.
Uh-huh.
So I buy from one realtor, so I sign a contract with him. I buy from another one and I sign another contract with him, and I buy from another and I sign another contract. And they as well can sign contracts with any of the other houses they own as
Mhm.
realtors. So they can have many contracts and you can have many.
Many contracts. That's a good example. I don't know why I automatically, my brain went to Phil Dunphy and I
Yeah, me too.
automatically thought of Modern Family. So yeah, you've got a realtor and then you've got and a realtor basically, is gonna have a series of houses that he or she can sell, but those have clients and those can also be sold by other realtors. So that could be an example of a many-to-many relationship. So here in the client's contracts, it could be either of the three, depending on the specific situation that we're analyzing. For example, another type of a marriage contract. A marriage contract, that has to be because we're gonna see that cardinalities, we're gonna define limits as well. A marriage contract has to be a one-to-many relationship, but that many is defined by two. Okay, because a marriage contract with one person doesn't make sense. I don't know if you can get married to yourself, maybe in some part of the United States that, and I have no idea. But, and, well, I don't know if, or there might be places in the world where polygamy is legally accepted. And I don't know if there are marriage contracts with
Yes.
that, so that might happen. So,
Maybe.
yeah, but that contract is only for that situation, so that would be an example of a one-to-many. So in this situation, we could have, or with that entity relationship, we could have either of the three. Okay.